Well, hello, everybody. I'm Ed Parco, and this is my co host, Amy T. Meyer of. All right, now we set the tone. Did you have a good Memorial Day? Did you
I
remember?
did. I did. How about you?
I was falling, actually. I laid around, didn't do anything because I didn't get in until 4 o'clock in the morning, Florida time, because the airplane decided that because there was a lightning strike 8 miles away from the airport that they couldn't do anything for about an hour and a half, and we were stuck on the plane. I know I'm complaining. Could be worse. Could be like, somewhere else. But anyway, let's get our guest in today is Marty Strong. He is I think, retired Navy SEAL. I had him on my Inner Edison podcast, and I thought he'd be great for us. Let's bring him in.
Very good.
Hello, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I love the riff at the beginning. That was great.
You like that little thing?
Yeah, I'm a big hair band of the '80s kind of guy, so I appreciated that.
Did you have the hair of the 80s?
No, I was in uniform. I had the hair of the 1950s when I was in the 1980s.
In the 80s, I had more hair than I had now. So anyway, that doesn't mean anything, but I had my hair the longest I ever had. It was in the Navy. I was one of those guys down in San Diego. So anyway, that's enough about hair stories.
Yeah.
All right.
I was just about to contribute.
Okay, go ahead. Contribute all you want.
Well, I guess the 80s, I was in high school, but when I went in the Army, they had me shave the back of my head. So when I wore a BDU cap, you couldn't tell I was a girl.
Really?
Yes.
What were they supposed to believe you were?
No idea.
What year was this?
1990.
Okay.
Actually.
So it was after Stripes. That was just, my wife was at the cabin. She goes, "What was that movie with that? It was just on." I'm like, "Stripes." Yeah, that's it. Yeah. My son's in the Army. He's airborne medic, so I make fun of him. I send him stuff like that all the time.
Yeah, I didn't get it because I watched the movie and I thought that's what the Army really was like. And then somebody said, no, it's actually supposed to be a satire of the Army. And okay.
Well, just let's go do this. It was kind of a dumb movie, but what are you going to do for it back in the time? Enough about movies. Enough. Or anybody seen Tom Cruise yet? Top Gun.
Yeah. Saw it Sunday.
Yeah. Well, I didn't. I got to take my wife.
I saw it with some veteran buddies, which I really feel is the best way to see military movies.
Yeah. I mean, I love my wife, but it's like one of those movies where it's like I usually go to movies if I want to see it, like the first showing, the earliest you could do, and just get in there and get out. But I'm sure we'll have to make it a date night or something.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Saving Private Ryan in a matinee with 5 other SEALs, all combat veterans, and that opening scene on Omaha Beach, we were all hyperventilating and shaking. It was pretty funny afterwards. When we got done with it, we all started comparing notes. Man, dude, you get all shook up like in the first 5 minutes. Yeah, all the sounds. It's when you train for combat, you don't hear the sounds of bullets hitting different kind of wood and ground and people, and you don't hear that. If you're lucky, you might get a few bullet cracks over your head if you're working the range butt system or something. But yeah, you don't hear that unless you go into it. So that was a shocking opening for us.
Yeah. So I was down at Miramar when that was going, when they were filming the Top Gun the first one. Yeah. Kansas City barbecue. Did you ever go there, Marty?
I didn't know.
Yeah. So in the original one, the scene in the bar and everything, it's at the Kansas City barbecue place. And you think it's like an amazing place. It was one of the biggest in the world. Anyway, it was like one of those, like, really, this is the place? Your claim to fame is Top Gun? Okay, I guess we'll keep it. Anyway, enough about everything else. Today is about Marty. All right. So Amy always asks, why did you join the service that you joined?
Yeah. So I got 2 answers. The first answer is I should have wanted to join the Navy first as a plan A, because I had an uncle that was in the Navy who was a submarine officer. He was lost after his 3rd or 4th mission taking Marine raiders into Japanese-held islands in the Pacific, and then none of them came back on I think the 4th or 5th op.
I'm sorry about that.
He's a great uncle.
Yeah.
So I'd never met. My father was in the Navy during the Korean War. He was a radarman. And my brother was a submarine electronics expert for 6 years in the Navy, and I wanted to join the Marine Corps. So I went to the mall on a Sunday with two of my friends we were all going to join the Marine Corps, and I chickened out. I saw I saw this slideshow of them in training and everything carrying these backpacks that looked like refrigerators, and I was about 125 pounds at the time. My two friends were big guys, but I said, "There's no way I'm going to be able to do that." So I went to the bathroom, and on the way back, this Navy recruiter asked me if I was lost or whatever, and what was I doing there. Next thing you know, I had his card, and 2 months later, I'd signed an early entry to go in the Navy. So that's how I ended up in the Navy.
Marty, I'm going to put you the same as us because you're kind of having a little issue with your Wi-Fi there, if you don't mind. That way, because when you're smaller, it's not as bad.
Okay.
Well, if you joined the Marine Corps, you would have been in the Department of the Navy, so it's almost the same thing.
That's true, and I would have been a lot shorter.
Look at Amy; she's like, "Huh? Yeah."
It would have been a lot shorter after carrying those backpack loads. So.
Yeah, but when you joined, did you joined as an officer, right?
Nope. I was enlisted for my first 10 years as a SEAL. So I joined, and I actually signed the paperwork when I was 16 as an early entry thing, basically about a year before. Went to boot camp about 4 days after I turned 17, and went to Radar Air Traffic Control School right after boot camp, and then went to SEAL training in Coronado, California. So my whole enlisted career was for 10 years was SEAL Team 2, and then I went back to be an instructor after 8 years of SEAL. So I was an instructor at the SEAL selection course before I went to Officers Candidate School, and then I finished out my second half of 20 years as an officer in the SEAL teams.
Now, once you're a SEAL, it doesn't matter if you're enlisted first and then an officer, right? You don't have to go back through. Make sure
you don't. It's there's some things that you go back through, like a lot of the basic. So kind of like in the Army and Marine Corps, there's always,
because Marty, you're our first SEAL who's done that, so that's why I have those questions.
Okay, so I can make anything up. All right.
Yes, you can. We have no idea if it's true or not.
The fact checkers will be after me anyway. So, you have like a beginning, a basic, an intermediate, and advanced. So for us, the basic was the selection course in California known as BUDS. Mm-hmm. Used to be 6 months. Now it's about 5 months. The second thing was a 4-month intermediate battery of training that really kind of taught you how to be a SEAL. And then everything after that you went through was considered advanced training. Sometimes you did it as an individual. Sometimes you did it collectively as a combat team or unit. So those are kind of the three phases of a SEAL. So if you've gone through all that as an enlisted guy, you don't need to go back and go through all that again, except when you get to the intermediate training, the advanced training, you didn't play the part of the officer in that made for movie, script. So you can't come back and say, well, I know how to be a rifleman or a point man or a rear security, or I know how to. No, now you got to be the guy in charge, or you got to be the planner. So they reload you in at the intermediate block, and you go through with all the guys that are just coming out of the basic block. And in my case, I was a 10-year veteran. I was an E7 when I went to Officers Candidate School. So I had a lot of advantage over brand new officers learning the same thing that I was quote unquote learning. But since I'd trained officers as an enlisted guy, and the same curriculum, besides going through it as an enlisted guy, I ended up, doing a lot more mentoring and coaching than anything else in that 4 months. But it was, you had to go through it. You weren't allowed to just say, well, I went through as an enlisted guy, so I know how to do all this stuff. And then when you get into the advanced training, the more advanced the mission set is, the more complex it is. Say like hostage rescue, where you've got upwards of 4, 5, 6 aircraft flying around in the air in different orbits, and you've got assault teams and blocking forces trying to stop people from coming in and reinforcing down roads. You got sniper teams, and you're sitting there like this conductor with this orchestra, and you've got 5 radios, and hoping not to say the wrong code word in the wrong radio. And so when you get to that level as an officer, it's completely different. So you're learning everything from scratch. So after about the first 4 months as an officer, everything after that was all new skills and new experiences. And I had to meet the grade like any other officer. I had to showed that I could do it without screwing everything up and causing helicopters to run into each other.
And then you were at 16 years more in
20.
20.
I did 20.
20. Okay.
Yeah.
So 10 and 10.
I
I
retired.
could count.
I didn't get the watch, but they weren't handing out watches in those days. I don't think they still are, but it just sounds funny.
Well, only some of us old people know that they used to give gold watches when you retired.
Yeah, not military, but yeah, civilians. They used to have something. No, I got the the big box with the flag and your medals and stuff in it, and a kegger afterwards and all that. That was kind of fun.
Now, Amy, go ahead, because I don't want to troll this whole thing.
No, I would ask, what did you enjoy the most, being enlisted or being an officer? Looking back,
I really liked being an enlisted guy after my first, say, 3 or 4 years, when I was actually considered what they call in the teams an operator. Same thing they call most of special ops. An operator is somebody, when you get that title, and it's not a real title, it's just, hey, do you know this guy? Yeah, he's a good operator. I mean, that means you've arrived. And people would entrust themselves, their friends, the mission to somebody like you. When you get to that point, it's great, because then you can contribute. People actually listen to you instead of saying, shut up and go empty a trash can, kid. So that second period, that 6 years as an enlisted guy, was really, really fun. And I mean fun. It was very low stress, and because you just kept getting more senior and wiser and smarter and better trained, and I wasn't, since I was so young when I made chief. I made chief when I was 26 years old. That's E7. I still had my health, but once you get to about 11, 12 years in the special operations community, you're kind of like an NFL running back. You've taken a lot of chips. You got a lot of chips and cracks and broken parts, and because the training is very realistic. So I was still young enough that when I became an officer, I was still intact, more or less, physically. The part about the officer 10 years that I liked was mission planning. I really liked, because when you're an enlisted guy and you have ideas, you put your ideas out there, and maybe they'll take them, maybe they won't. And if they take your idea and use it, you feel like, okay, wow, I had some input to this. I contributed to the plan, not just executing the plan. But when you're an officer, you're responsible for creating the plan and then leading the execution of the plan. So there's a lot of risk of failure, and there's a lot of eyeballs watching you. But at the same time, you have freedom to screw up or freedom to really do well. And I knew that the way to do well was to listen to my enlisted guys, because I'd spent 10 years watching officers not listening. And I knew what the formula was. So I had another leg up being prior enlisted. And I said, okay, I get everybody in the room and toss them a dry erase pen and say, how are we going to do this? And they'd all work it all out, and they'd come back, and I might tweak one thing or the other, and I'd package it all up and brief it, and it would work. So that was fun. That collaboration, designing of the solution, which is the same thing I love doing today. That really wasn't there so much as an enlisted guy, unless you happen to be lucky enough to work for an officer that was willing to put together a plan the same way that I described.
Now, after you did today, do they do that now, or is it back to the other way? You know what I mean? Like, do they listen to the guys? Because, the worst thing you see in all movies and everything you see, people you talk to, it's like the enlisted people go through and they do it. They actually live it. And, and then the officer's like, shut up. We're going to do it my way. I'm not saying all officers, because I don't need that hate mail. But did it change anything after you left, or is it the same way?
Well, in our community, it was a rare officer that would ever say anything disrespectful to the enlisted guys, because
I didn't mean disrespectful. I just meant not
in a
listening
small
to
unit
them.
like that, they can make you look stupid fast, right? Because like I said, all the eyeballs are on you. So if they want to, they can make you look bad really fast. So there's a little bit of a governor on that kind of an attitude. And if the officers don't understand that instinctively, guys like me, when we were senior enlisted guys, would pull them aside and tell them, because we want them to get past the learning curve as quickly as possible, so that they are user friendly and they're functional as an officer, at least in that unit, right? But from what I understand, and it's kind of gone full circle now, when 9/11 happened, all the special operations units kind of stopped what they were doing, which at the time, you're talking about 2001, doesn't matter what color uniform they were wearing, they all had multiple missions, multiple environments, Arctic, desert, jungle, on the water, under the water, mountains, all those things. And lots of missions in those different environments. So there's a lot of training going on that was trying to cover all those bases. As soon as 9/11 happened, pretty much everybody stopped all that and they went to the proverbial, sandbox, whether it was Iraq or Afghanistan. And when they got there, the first missions, especially in Iraq, were kind of constructed the way they were up to that time, which is nobody knew exactly what was going to happen. Nobody knew exactly what the bad guys were going to do, the good guys were going to do to support you. So the planning was done based on creativity. And then we'll sort it all out when we get there, kind of a mindset. But once they started doing repeat missions, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, it started to get more into a football play approach, because you started having the same players supporting you, the same roads you're going down, the same kind of hot spots in the environment, whether it's urban or mostly non-urban, and obviously in Afghanistan. And all the feedback that I've heard from those guys is that at the time it got to where that, with all the technology on you too, where, basically they can see what you see, they can see you went left instead of right. So when they critique you, they can micromanage and critique you every step of the entire mission, which didn't exist in the old days. You could brief. I had a saying with my guys, well, we had a plan for show and a plan for go. So the plan for show is what the bosses wanted to see, what they wanted the officers to emphasize in their mission planning and all that. Even if I thought it wasn't rational, reasonable, or probably wasn't going to pan out. And then once we got inserted to the site, we would just take a deep breath and we would do old school reconnaissance and take it nice and slow and check the place out ourselves, and then come up with a plan that worked. It may or may not have anything to do with the original plan. That was the plan for go. And you can't do that if you're all wired up and you've got a predator bee sitting over the top of you and a guy's talking in your ear. Why'd you go that way? Why didn't you go this way? What are you doing on the rooftop? So that took a lot of the spontaneity and the creativity out of on-scene planning, and you didn't have anything but the plan for show. The other part of the problem with the plan for show is the more assets that are attached to your mission, the more extra players, you can't just go and wing it like you used to be able to, because everybody needs to know what you changed. And there's too many people in the loop. There's too many people in chains of command all the way back to the United States sometimes. So it's a long answer to your short question, but it's become very restrictive and a lot more set piece and more difficult to kind of just come up with something wildly creative. Up until about 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, there was an effort, and I'm sure it's happening in the other services in the spec ops community, to go back to what they considered their legacy approach. Multifaceted, because they don't know where they're going to go next. There's not one set piece war in one country with one type of terrain or environment and one enemy. So I think they're getting back to that. I'd be surprised if they aren't getting more creative and kind of going back to those early basics in the SEAL teams.
Wow. Thanks for that. Appreciate that.
That's very interesting.
Yes, it was. I mean, because there's, we have other people in play now versus just the sandbox. So,
yeah, absolutely. And like I said, you have so many other partners, which is good. You got technology partners, you've got aviation partners, and sometimes it's Army aviation, Air Force aviation, Navy aviation, or all three. Depending at different altitudes, you got combat air patrols for the Navy. Yeah, you just can't. It's much more. I'll say it's much more professional and technical in putting together a special operations plan and mission and executing it than it was, say, 15, 20 years ago. It demands a different thing.
What year did you get out?
I got out in 1995.
Now, looking back, so that was 20 years, and you're in 1995. And when you got out, did you know what you're going to do when you got out, or was it like, okay, I'm done, or did you plan a couple years before? I'm just saying, sometimes people are like, I'm done, I'm out of here. You may, or you didn't have a choice,
And anybody that's been in the service has known people that were planning that like 3 weeks after boot camp. everybody had a master plan, right?
Yeah, whatever.
And if the master plan keeps changing, it's kind of funny. But if the master plan never changed, it's kind of interesting. If I'm going to open up a woodworking shop in Montana. I'm going to open a woodworking shop in Montana, and then they get out after 4 years, and they're working in a woodworking shop in Montana. So they told us, and they never changed their plan, and they went and they executed. No, all anybody in the SEAL teams ever wants to do is test their mettle, test their skills in combat. So I did 36 combat missions, and I was lucky to do it. The timing was just right, and I did as an officer. So I had checked that box as far as professionally, and I only had 1 or 2 more years left where I was not going to be on a staff making sure that dog food and aviation fuel moved from point A to point B or something. Also, as I started getting, say, into the 14th year, 15th year, what I mentioned earlier about the NFL comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, broken legs, parachute accident, got a curvature of the back from that, blew out discs from that, over 200 stitches from different injuries. And, you get banged. I had my teeth knocked out twice, not in a bar fight. It was slight. It was faster up and down on something. But, you walk with a little bit of a hitch, and you start looking like the old sheriff in the old West town, and then the young guys are looking at you and sizing you up. And that's a part of that environment. You're looking around, and the young guys, you're off on a run, and you're 33 years old, and they're 21. And as they're passing me, at warp speed, morning, sir. How you doing, sir? Hey, sir. Morning, sir. I'm like, okay. And
plus you were injured, right? So you can't go as fast as you
but you can't whine about that. If you're too injured, just quit,
Right. No, I just meant you were hurt from some other stuff. So there's no way you can compete with those guys.
And nobody cares. Yeah. So, but you see that horizon coming at that moment. I know everybody in professional sports has got that moment where they're like half a step slower than they were, and they're like, and I'm not gonna be able to make that up, and so you start wondering, how much more do I have in me? So I had those two things incenting me and motivating me to figure out what I wanted to do when I got out of uniform, because one or the other was going to happen. Either my injuries were going to get me to a point where I needed to get out, or I was going to be put into a position where, for that point forward as an officer, I was just going to be in a staff, and I was never going to be gunned up with a bunch of team guys, shooting and looting and having fun ever again. And I lucked out. Right up towards the end, I was a task unit commander deployed overseas. It was a special deal. I had 38 SEALs and divers attached to me with a mini submarine unit and all that stuff. And I got out 18 months later. I retired 18 months later. So I only had about 18 months of sitting in a chair behind a desk, which was enough for me. So that last 18 months is when I really focused. I wanted to be a lawyer, took the LSAT, prepared to be a lawyer. And then a buddy talked me out of that and talked me into getting into financial planning and basically becoming a stockbroker, a portfolio manager. So that's what I actually did when I got out.
And how long did you do that?
I did that for 7.5 years.
Wow.
I did that first with a company called Legg Mason Wood Walker out of Baltimore. And I was a financial advisor. So you're managing money, but you have to go find all your own clients and everything, and then pick the investments for them and manage the investments. And then the last four years, I was with United Bank of Switzerland as a portfolio manager. So that was a little bit different. That was, it's called fee-based. So basically, I charge a fixed fee of a portfolio. And if the portfolio goes up, I make more money. If it goes down, I make less money. So I'm kind of incentivized along with the client. And obviously, if I'm going down all the time, they'll just fire me. But
right.
I was halfway decent at it, so that wasn't happening. So yeah, I did that for 7.5 years.
So you're still clocking only like maybe 45 at that point, right? 7.5 years, because you retired really.
If you said that to a woman, we'd be in trouble. That's just wrong. That's reverse sexism.
But she said clocking, so it felt like it was a speed thing. Like I was clocking.
Yeah. You can't ask a woman her age, but you sure can ask this guy's age. That's how it is.
You're right. I was 37 when I retired. I was about 44 and a half or something when I left financial services, and I went into consulting and counterterrorism consulting, working for the government, working for some defense firms that were doing government contracts, all mostly threat profiling and looking at critical targets, national infrastructure. I did the Athens Olympics over in Greece, trying to figure out what the bad guys were going to do, storyboarding out what their mission timeline and what their kind of battle set looked like, and then giving that to all the European intelligence services, obviously the Greek military and intelligence services, and see if they can spot all these early stage things like reconnaissance, surveillance of targets and stuff like that, so they can wrap them up early. And that was rewarding. That worked out pretty good. So I was doing that for a couple of years, and then I got into the government contracting world as a vice president, mostly business development.
Do you want to add his age now, or are we okay with this?
Well, no, I just, as you know, Ed, I'm not a sensitive woman, and I'm not sensitive at all about my age. So
I am now 47.
Yes.
Because
Bravo.
you don't do that anymore. You're a totally different thing. So should we?
No, I did that for I'm afraid to say the number of years.
I think I just did it for a while. Then after that,
then Amy's gonna have to guess how I ended up.
Yeah.
So I did that for at one company. I did it for about 5.5 years. Went to another company, became an equity partner. It was a very small, $6 million a year training company.
And yes, Amy started to get the mail from AARP at that time. So
yeah, not a little early, but yeah,
they send it way early, just so you know.
They do, and I just say it's for my wife. But she's younger than me, and she even looks younger than she is. So I always get strange looks when I'm with her. So I did that and grew the company. Eventually, me and my partner, who was the founder, also a SEAL, we sold the company to the employees in 2015, and he moved on to other things. He's still on our board of directors. And as a employee-owned company, it's an ESOP. The shareholders are the employees. So I decided that we needed to do something to hedge the end of the global war on terror, and because we were a government contracting company focused on tactical training. So I convinced the board to let me buy a healthcare company. I mean, it was very small, one employee managing about 26 doctors and nurses. And that was 5.5 years ago. 5 years ago. And that's 168 employees, and now we're in 7 states with that company. And we still have the government contracting company. It kept growing. So I manage those 2 companies as a CEO under this employee-owned structure. They each have leaders, and then they kind of report to me. But I'm mostly strategy and resource support. I'm like those guys in the planes that used to help me out. I'm hovering, orbiting.
You're the guys way up in the stands telling everybody else how to do the football stuff.
Yeah. And I'm still doing it. I'm 64. Gotcha. See, there you go. I'm 64.
All right. But what Amy doesn't know, which I know because I interviewed you, is he writes a lot of books.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
And what you want to explain that part, and then we'll go back to asking some more questions.
Sure. I'm not going to put any ages or dates on it.
You don't have to. That's okay.
I'm not. So I have 8 novels published, and they're in 2 different series. There's 4 novels in a time travel science fiction series, and 4 in a SEAL military adventure type novel series. The 5th book in that series comes out this June 30th. It's on Amazon now for pre-sale, called Kandahar Moon. And I started writing because I wanted to write, and I also wanted to write nonfiction. I wanted to write a business book, which I eventually did, but I really liked writing the novels. I really enjoyed it. And the first couple of novels got great reviews. And so I said, oh, I guess I'll keep doing this. This is kind of interesting. And the SEAL books are not about me, but I have a lot of the things that I experienced in there as events, and I just put them in different places and all that. So it's realistic from that point of view. My wife's actually listening to the Audible version of book 2 of the SEAL series, and she was asking me the other day, how much this is you? And well, it's not me. The officer in the series is a young, brand new officer, and I already explained I had 10 years under my belt before I went to OCS. So I donate all the proceeds from those novels, it doesn't matter which series, to the SEAL Veterans Foundation, which there's a program within the SEAL Veterans Foundation, and that foundation is it was created by the SEAL Association, which has been around since 1970. It was the very first association created by SEALs, Vietnam era SEAls, to kind of capture the culture and to try to capture some of the heritage and things. Because back then we didn't have an admiral in charge. There was no Special Operations Command. It was just a SEAL team on the West Coast and a SEAL team on the East Coast. So it's evolved and grown over the years. Tens of thousands of former team guys and people that were involved in the SEAL community are members of that association. And then they created this foundation to do good things. And my money is all earmarked towards a program called MLAP, which focuses on PTSD and traumatic brain injury, and helping veterans get qualified by the VA. Because, as you guys know, I mean, PTSD was not part of anybody's, exit physical for a long time. Nobody even looked for it. And if you'd said, I think that I'm having some problems sleeping, whatever, they'd say, okay, sleep apnea, whatever, get a CPAP machine next. And then,
or here's a bunch of pills.
Yeah. And traumatic brain injury wasn't even a thing. Nobody even talked about it, even though we were all repeating ourselves and acting like idiots after a while. So you'd fast forward, and now that's a real thing. It's provable, it's detectable, medically. But what happens if you got out and you didn't retire? What happens if you got out at 8 years and you have, 6 combat tours and you were next to an IED and you've got problems with your memory or sleeping and all that, or you got PTSD or a combination of both? You can't go to the VA unless it was rated as an injury in combat at the time. And you didn't retire, so you didn't get a retirement physical where they started identifying all this stuff. So there's a gap there. So that's what this program does. It helps connect them with experts and that former VA people actually that put together their packages and help walk them through the entire process. And some of them are pretty significant. I know a guy that had 0 disability, and they got him up to, I think, 80%. And so it's not always just TBI and PTSD. Sometimes it's other things that just weren't documented. Or, everybody tries to be, a badass, right?
Mm-hmm. Even on the way out.
When you're checking out as a Marine or an Army infantry or airborne dude or whatever SEAL, your last conversation isn't, hey, I want to have all these extra benefits because I think I'm all broken up and everything. That's the first kind of bridge that guys have to, the psychological thing, that it's okay to say you have all these problems. And that's what these counselors that are paid for by this SEAL Veterans Foundation program, they do that. You got to tell me what your worst day feels like. You can't hold anything back. This isn't a macho test. You really got to tell me. So it's a good program. I've been doing that for now going on 4.5, 5 years, and totally separate from my business books. Business books are part of a consulting practice, and that's Be Nimble and Be Visionary. And those are, you have to do a homework assignment and then call me with a book report if you guys want to read those too.
See, he's multifaceted.
Yes.
Had to look that word up, by the way. Huh?
But I said, Ed and I are both readers.
Actually, I'm a listener. I don't read. I listen.
Well, then you guys are made for each other.
She doesn't listen either. She just reads. No, I prefer Audible. That way, when I'm out doing other things, I can listen. Otherwise, if I sit there with a book, I fall asleep. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I read every day, but I do audibles. To me, are more stories. So to me, like if I'm driving down to Bend, which is like 6 hours away, having a storybook versus a self-help manual that's supposed to help me do this thing, where I'm like trying to write down or figure out how, while driving, to index this page or whatever to go back to, that is not helpful for me.
On your steering wheel, you can hit this button and say, hey, note this. Or it's amazing.
I did not know that.
I
did not know that. I just realized my steering wheel heated up after having my vehicle for a year.
Yeah, it's that bacon on there is the steering
Yeah,
wheel button.
I'd look into that too. It shouldn't take a year for it to heat up.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm the opposite of that. I listen to nothing but self-help and
Yeah.
technical books because in the car I'm a captive audience, right? So
Right.
so I consume nonstop books that way every day, every hour I'm driving, and I read a Kindle. All the novels and stories and stuff, the fiction that I read are always on a Kindle because I can supersize it. And I can take it everywhere with me, and I can have 3 or 4 books on there. And yeah, so I haven't read a hardcover book or even a paperback book in years.
I like putting mine on like 1.5 and listening to it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I'm one of
do.
those. I was an accident one time walking down in San Diego, and I was like, oh my God, I can get through a book. It's so much faster.
I actually, true story, started listening to a book, and I had a 2.5 hour drive, and I finished the book before I got to where I was going.
Wow.
And I told somebody at the other end, I said, I just finished this book, man. The guy was talking so fast. I mean, it was like really hard to concentrate, but it made the time go fast. But man, he was just, I mean, really talking fast. And he goes, let me see your phone. He goes, and it was set for like, twice the speed you'd want it to be for a normal. And he goes, yeah, you can just do this. I go, you're kidding me, right? I said, well, I did consume a whole book in 2.5 hours, Can't remember.
As long as
any of
you,
it.
yeah, I can remember what they say. That's what's good for me. So it works for me. Marty, thank you so much for coming on today. What was the name of the foundation where all your proceeds go to? So if people want to look it up,
The SEAL Veterans Foundation.
that's just what it's.
That's it. And if they want to, find the books, the easiest way is to go to my website, martystrong.com. And
We'll have that in the notes.
Books are at the bottom of the homepage.
Nice.
Is it Am I Strong Author? What's that one? Is that your adventure?
ML Strong Author that's my fiction author site, but you can go there too.
Well,
Sometimes it's easier for people to remember Marty Strong, Be Nimble.
I just was looking at what Amy typed up. So
Yeah, they're both legitimate sites.
I didn't say it was bad. I just was looking at on the screen what she typed up.
I know. I kind of feel like anything that you say Amy did is a criticism.
But don't go to marvstrang.com because that's not me.
Okay, we won't.
Okay.
All right, Marty, anything else you want to put say today? Because you've said a lot, and I've enjoyed your time here, learning about the SEALs and what you did. I don't know about Amy, so
I'm exhausted for a guy my age.
That's right.
This is a lot. I had to stay up for this interview.
That's right. He missed his dinner time too. Early bird special is over. What are you going to do? That's all right. Thanks for putting out there how old he is. That's just a little rude. I don't know if you read, things about that. That's inappropriate. So.
That's okay. Once you pass like about 55, if you're doing anything, you're kicking everybody's butt. You're on the other side of the bell curve. Now you're special.
Yeah. Well, most people don't know how old people are today anyway. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Anything else, Amy, that you want to ask him before we go?
No, just thank you so much for your time. It was a really fun conversation. I love learning about all the things that you've done.
Well, thanks for having me. Nice meeting you, Amy.
Nice to meet you too.
See, he doesn't like me, so that's okay.
All right.
Who does?
I know. I appreciate you being on the show. Appreciate you being on Inner Edison with me. Also, I appreciate both that. It's great to get to know people's stories about how how they picked their service, why they did what they did, and where they are on the side. We also want to break down the silos in between all the nonprofits within the veteran world, because there's too many of them that are so close that won't work together, and we need to change that. And I was at that PodFest I was telling you about. I always walk around with my PTSD t-shirts to see, and then amazing how people stop me and go, "Is that part of your podcast?" No, this is because of this, right? And so there was a lot of vets there who want to come on our show because of walking around with these. So again, PTSD is something we need to deal with. So thanks for what you do, Marty. Amy, thank you for what you do. I appreciate it. And everybody, thanks for watching. If you like this, just keep following us like you do. Anything else, Marty? I thought you said something before I cut you off.
Thanks for having me, guys.
It's our pleasure. Stay right there, though.